Howdy, friends. I'm up and running. I've got a very special friend I'm going to have a chat to tonight. He's got a wealth of information and background and knowledge about our local music industry, which is great. But before I bring him on, I want to blatantly just promote what I do. I've got a little show, my 70s Unplugged show, coming up in Toowoomba on the 26th of July, and I'm going to run a little ad for it. So have a look at this. Hey Toowoomba, I'm bringing my 70s Unplugged show to Club Toowoomba on Hume Street on Friday, July 26th, doors opening at 7 p.m. My acoustic show is a celebration of some of the greatest songwriters ever, artists like Cat Stevens, James Taylor, Don McLean, Bob Seger, Bruce Springsteen, John Denver, and heaps more. Grab your tickets at my website, nickphillips.com, or if you want to buy them at the door, send me a message so that we can hold seats for you. There's only a limited number available. I'll see you there, Friday night, July 26th for the 70s Unplugged show. So there you go. If you're in Toowoomba, please grab some tickets to come along. If you're not in Toowoomba, but you know people who are, please flick this to them and share it around and tell them they should come and see me. It's a good show. I'm going to bring this guy on. Please welcome Mr. Nathan Ward. How are you, mate?
Hello.
Mate, we got a lot we can talk about tonight. But, the good thing is when, two friends get talking, you don't have to worry about cheap shots or anything like that. So just to start off with, I'd like to probably mention that, you're a New South Welshman who moved up here to Queensland. And it must be really kind of daunting to see what true sporting spirit is like and not to be able to be a part of it directly. Is that an issue you deal with?
Well, I'm not going to lie, Nick. I am one of those New South Welshmen that will remain a New South Welshman until I die. I'm certainly not a turncoat, hence the blue shirt tonight. I thought you were going to bring this up, so I thought I'd wear a light blue shirt for you. But
I've got a little Redcliffe T-shirt on here about Redcliffe Hospital because I know you're kind of heading out that way, and it's a chance for you to jump from the green of the Raiders to the mighty Finns who are playing tonight as we
Finns up. I do have a soft spot for the Finns, mate. I obviously, had a bit of history with them when I was younger. So yeah. And you were right about the Queensland spirit, mate. I think I've lived up here. I've been in Queensland longer than what I've been a New South Welshman or living in New South Wales. And there certainly is a spirit and passion that Queensland have that New South Wales as a whole don't sort of get or understand.
Yeah. And of course, I'm taking the mickey out of you because I think it's the thing that makes this whole thing work is that you actually stay true to where you started from. And
well, it's a state of origin, isn't it?
Absolutely. But it's good to kind of have a knock at each other now and then. But mate, we're kind of really pretty new friends. I mean, we've both been around the local industry here in Queensland for a long time, but we really only met through COVID. And it was a mate of mine, Nigel Silcock, who during COVID, I was getting on these different rants in my little bubble that I live in, and about what was going on with the government and our music industry. And Nigel said, mate, you should talk to Nathan from Jabba because he's put some things together with some protest things and holding discussions around what was going on. And we met through that time. And but it's been a real blessing getting to know you, but it's been an added blessing as well, just a little bit of cream on top recently in the last few months to get to know your dad, Ross. And mate, he's a great blues guitarist from Sydney who's moved up here. And from what I've got to know Ross, he's a very genuine character, which is obviously reflected in you. He's obviously much better looking than you, but that flows on. My dad's much better looking than me as well. But when I got into music, it was my family weren't musical, mate. They loved listening to music, but my sister is a good spoons player. No, hang on. She's a bad spoons player, but she drags them out. We have fun when we can, having too many drinks at parties. But my family weren't musicians, so it was my choice. But you were kind of like raised by the cult. You were like you had no way of escaping. You were going to be a rock musician no matter what because of your dad, uncles, and everything else around you were all musicians. Is that right?
It's pretty close, Nick. I actually, believe it or not, was going to be either a rugby league or rugby union player. Had some pretty good prospects until, like most guys, when you get to 18 or so and your knees or shoulders or something start to give way. That's what happened with me, and I realised pretty quick I didn't want to work in a factory building filing cabinets anymore. I wanted to I wanted to have something in life to look forward to. I wanted to be.
What position did you play in football?
I was a 5'8".
Oh wow!
Also in rugby, I played open side breakaway. So,
if you had to choose between the codes, which you enjoyed playing most, can you do that? Or
I did enjoy. I enjoyed both, Nick, but I think there was a certain element in rugby union back then, being a gentleman's game, and I know that I'm still an avid golfer, so there's something that I've kind of always leaned towards the gentleman's games. I enjoyed playing cricket as well too.
I was a mad cricket player. I played soccer, football, I played hockey, all that stuff, and I was a mad sportsman until at 18 I started doing music full time, and that kind of gets thrown out the window. But looking at I've always loved rugby and rugby union, rugby league and rugby union, and I've done a lot of stuff with the Queensland Reds and the Origin stuff, and got to know a lot of players. Looking at the two games, mate, you might clarify this for me, because I'm happy to admit I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just my outsider looking in. You got rugby league is a great TV game because a lot happens around the ruck, and it's like that close in sort of thing. And it seems to be probably a bit more physical with the clashes going up, bang, 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 bang. Union seems to me to be a bit more of a chess game, where it's right across much more of the field, and it's sort of more expansive. Maybe, the rucks are probably not as rigorous as like a rugby league hit on tackles, but you certainly got the way the scrums work and everything else is a bit more complex. And I actually like Union from that point of view. That's more of a complex game, I think, to strategize around. Is that is there any sort of validity to what I'm saying there, or am I totally?
No, I think you're pretty right, mate. Being that there's not the counted rucks that there are in rugby league, which is I play the ball for rugby league.
Yep.
Isn't it funny? I've just had a funny thought. A couple of musos talking about sport. That's bloody great. We should start a new podcast, Nick.
Well, I think that's actually got relevance. That now I find, as I look at a lot of guys in business who've been successful, you go back to their early lives and they were either going to be musicians or sportsmen. And they kind of a lot of them ran their course there, and they then went into business and made a lot more money than we ever will. And we're a lot smarter, obviously. But at their origins, you find them at this age, we're my age, older than you, but they tend to be going back to those roots and rebuying musical instruments or re-getting into sporting things and that, because it takes them back to their youth. And I think there is a correlation between sportsmen and musicians. It's all, I had a thing recently where I was doing stuff in China. I got involved with some business people, and I didn't get that world because it was all dog eat dog. How do you kind of, get this over that person or anything else? Whereas all the bands and music I came up with, it was like you're in a team. You were just going for that goal together. And I think that's a lot like sport,
100%, mate. I one of the great drummers that I got to play with, a guy called Jackie Barnes, who's quite famous now around not just in Australia but around the world with some of the projects and bands he plays with. That's Jimmy Barnes' son. Mm-hmm. He was the one that pointed out to me a long time ago that all the retired sportsmen and professional sportsmen all have a want to be musicians and have a genuine love for music, and all the music guys have a genuine love to want to be a sportsman. So I think it's that grass is greener a little bit too, and our mate Tuffy being so involved in AFL and stuff like that too. You see that with certain operators. That guy that works for me, Carl Bazansky, that's another mate of yours. He's another booker at Jabber.
Mad Carl. You mean Mad Carl?
Mad soccer. He'll hate the fact that I'm even calling it soccer because he calls it football.
It's football, man. It's football.
He played quite high levels of that, and Carl and I kind of have connected, as Sol, my business partner, and I have too, being that we all had sporting backgrounds. So it was that exactly, the nail that you hit on the head there was being part of a team environment. And that's why
sorry.
No, you're right. Just saying predominantly that's why I love playing in bands and acts, as opposed to guys like you that have the strong will to be able to continually be able to go out and do solo shows on your own. That's something I kind of always have admired. I find that quite hard to do.
Forgive me coughing and snorting a bit. I'm still finding a bit of a head cold here. But mate, I think one of the real challenges with the sporting life is that for a lot of people, their careers kind of end maybe early mid-30s.
Yep.
The interesting thing about being a musician is, look, some people get to be successful early in their life. But me, I've had someone like myself, for example, I've had a lot of great experiences. I've done a lot of very successful things, but I've never had that big breakthrough moment, you know, which propels you over the top. But because I haven't had that, it doesn't mean I've had to give up in my 30s, whatever. I think I'm a journeyman in that sense. It's been a journey. And I actually think now I'm actually singing better and performing better than I ever have before. And I've got a lot more knowledge about what I've done before. And it's just this continual evolution of growth, which could lead to success, or maybe, you know, just keep doing my journey. But that's something I can do in music, where it's sport, that kind of gets taken away from you when your body can't handle it as much. And I think that's a bit of a blessing.
I think also, Nick, you're a very humble guy. And I think, like many successful musicians, you probably don't view your own career the way that others view it. And I think when you say you haven't had the big commercial success and stuff, I think if the general population actually looked into your credentials, I think they'd be pretty surprised at the amazing things that you've done during your career. I think being that our industry is an ego-based thing, and I don't mean that in a negative way. You and I both know ego is not a dirty word, but
you got to have ego to get on the stage, man.
You sure do. You sure do. And to be a good performer, 100%. But guys like you, I found it interesting listening to your podcast the other day with Shay on Sauna Session. Shay, when he asked you,
Shay's doing a great job. Yeah.
Yeah, when he asked you about, do you have an alter ego to go on stage, and you don't, it's you're just and I liked hearing then that you regard yourself as a journeyman, but the truth is, for me, I'm not like that. I have an alter ego for when I perform and when I go on stage. I know my dad certainly does. And I do see a difference between the Nick that, you know, you and I have phone calls during the week and I get to vent to you about all sorts of funny stuff in the industry. And I see a difference between that Nick and when you're on stage. It's so I find those things. I love the psychology of musicians and people, and I found that bit quite interesting with you and Shay the other day.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think when I was saying I don't have an alter ego, it's not like I'm like, you look at David Bowie playing a character, you know, Ziggy Stardust or whatever. That's a totally different alter ego. And I get it too, mate. When you're doing shows like with Creedence, whatever, you need to get in that zone where you're kind of living that zone they were in to perform what you do. And you guys do that brilliantly with what you do, by the way. And I love the show I saw on the weekend. It was really, really good.
We actually had we had a great opening act for that, Nick. I don't know if you saw.
Well, hey, what can I say? But mate, for me, it's more about, I can't pretend to be someone else, but I need to, like, when I talk in a general conversation, I've got a pretty quiet voice. And I see that with a lot of singers, actually. You actually listen to Barnsey being interviewed, and Barnsey's got a bit of a quiet Scottish accent voice, you know. Yep. And you tend to protect your voice and you do what you do here. But when you're on stage, you suddenly got to, like, get that voice in the mask. You got to get out there. You got to be like, someone said to me when they see Springsteen on stage, he's not that big, but even when he's doing solo with the guitar, he like takes up all this space. You need to be able to actually project yourself somehow so that you're commanding attention. And that doesn't make you a different person, but it means you have to tap into something that brings out this X factor that makes people want to look at you, interact with you, and engage with what you're doing musically. And when like when I supporting, you guys were kind enough to ask me to come and do some songs from my 70s Unplugged show to open up for Creedence, and that was great. And it was brilliant. We had a few hundred people in the room. Everyone was watching the stage. Lights were down. Had good PA. Had the lights on me, and I could command their attention, just being me and a guy on stage.
Yep.
And that's what I do really well. the biggest challenge in my life is that for a lot of my living I have to make at the moment, I still have to turn up to these venues where you're stuck in a corner. They got sort of 40 TVs on around you. You got to keep the volume down, and you got to like kind of hide in the corner, not really be out there and entertain people. And that's the biggest challenge to me, is how do I balance that I know I can do, you know, what you guys allow me to do on the weekend really well. But when I walk into a venue, local venue, where you're having to do the singer in the corner thing where no one cares, I don't care. I just play songs, and you know, you're not adding to the night, you're not doing anything special, you're just turning up and doing that. Whereas if the venue wanted to work with me and create the atmosphere in the room from the get-go, we can actually help those people have an experience where they want to come back to that venue again.
Sure. And I think the good point you've raised there is there's just different levels of platforms, Nick. And again, I'm going to use that word ego, because what you're talking about, for me, there was a weekend when I was in a band called the Driving Conditions, and we played on the Saturday night. We played with the Radiators and the Angels, opening for them for a sold-out show at Acacia Ridge. Then we drove down to Fisho's the next day on the Gold Coast, and we opened for Jimmy Barnes. Then the following Thursday, Friday, we went down to Sydney and we opened up for Rose Tattoo for 2 gigs, all sold-out shows, all big ego-feeding shows. And then on the Saturday night, Sol and I had to come back, and Dave Stapleton, our drummer at the time, came back, and we played a cover gig at was Broadbeach Tavern.
Yeah, Broady, yeah.
Which normally, you know, look, there was people partying up and dancing and all that stuff, but it was the first time I really felt an ego deflation, and that people really kind of didn't care who we were, because we were up there just playing the general stuff, and it became a massive ego check for me. And I recently read a funny Facebook post by Phil Emanuel's daughter, Jessie, who we get to work with sometimes. She'd been headlining with Hinterland down at the Broadbeach Country Music Festival. I forget what that's called now. Anyway, and then the next day she had to come back and do a duo gig where no one, or a solo gig where no one sort of was really listening or caring too much. So there's a different thing between platform and your bread and butter and being a professional, and a consummate professional. And they're the trials and tribulations, again, of how we deal with that as musicians, you know, whether that's something you do or it's something you don't. You know, Shay, when I did my podcast with Shay, he mentioned a funny thing. Rick Rubin, you know, probably the world's biggest producer, put out to a lot of people where he said, get your money and your finances and your career sorted first, then follow your music career if all you want to do is originals. I personally, I think there's merit in that, but I also have come from an era like you, Nick, where we've seen acts like Powderfinger, just about nearly every single Australian massive act that you and I have known and seen become big has at some point been a cover band, or they've gone back to doing tributes and cover work now in theatres and stuff. I think, again, I'm going to use the word ego. It's such an ego-driven industry that it's your perception on how you can do those things. And that's where guys like yourself and Blake Durant from BAM and the band Jabba I see you guys as flagships that I like to point out to other young artists that suffer from those same trials and tribulations that you and I have been through.
Well, mate, this, to me, the thing I've tried to get across to my kids is that success is being able to wake up in the morning and you're thinking about your passion and you go and work as your passion. I could never, at a young age coming out of school, I had, a job as a cadet real estate value for 6 months, and that was never going to be me. My dad had a small business, and I worked with him for a little while, and but then I was on the road playing music, and that had just been all I always saw myself doing. And from then till now, yeah, through COVID, I should have thought of what else. I should have come up with what else should I do. I should have found something else to do. But I wake up every day thinking about my music, and I've been able to make that my living, except through the COVID period. I've never had to be on welfare or anything else. I've always made my living out of doing that. And there's a lot of people like me in the music industry who fill up this space that, we balance our world between going out. Okay, we're going again. Yeah, but I've been lucky to, one of the things I said to my kids was, if you can wake up in the morning and you're thinking about your work as your passion, you're not actually going to work. You live in your passion, and that's been a blessing to me. And I think that there's a lot of musicians like me who kind of make up this whole creative space where we do cover gigs, we write music, produce music, we're doing all this stuff down here, and occasionally someone gets to float up into the big game. But the real game is happening where 98% of people live, and to be able to live that life where you're waking up and living your passion every day, not just turning up to do a job that you're doing just to pay the bills, which I appreciate. Some people decide to do that. A lot of people decide to do that, and that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that could never work for me. While I've never had that big commercial success, I've been very successful in being able to live my life around my passion.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Nick. I certainly don't agree with you haven't had the commercial success because,
well, the dollars aren't in the bank, so that's a reality in that sense. But
yeah, look,
I get that.
I get and understand that too. My dad kind of has a similar outlook on those things sometimes too. And I just want to, I just like to say too, obviously with your kids, anyone watching this, check out Harry Phillips. He's a very good-looking young rooster and a great musician, and has some really good original stuff. I'd love to see you do Harry on here one night too, Nick. It's certainly been, as you know, my dad's filled in on bass for us with Creedence the last few weeks as Sol's been a bit crook. And it's really interesting watching, I'm sure as you saw when I introduced him on stage as my dad, people seem to really have a massive connection to that.
Absolutely. There's a real energy that comes across in that. And mate, he was obviously great with Creedence, and I'm really grateful that he's been able to, endure doing some duo gigs with me as well, mate. He's like come down to the gutter at my level, and we've had some fun.
No, he loves playing with you, mate. It's it's been a good opportunity. Like he tells me about the laughs you guys have, and it was great for him to go and watch you and Tuffy as well too, with your dominating show that you guys do on your Sundays. And watching the way the crowd react to you two guys, the way you play off each other and stuff. It's that's a fantastic show.
So, mate, you've lived most of your music life, which is probably your career life, as a great guitarist, and you've worked with, you might want to mention some of the amazing artists you've worked with over your career. And you've ended up in the agent world, in the business side of the business side of the industry. I just want to talk us through a little bit of that journey, like one about the stuff that you did musically, then how you landed in the business world.
Oh, look, like you, Nick, I've always been a hustler, so I would rather be out working rather than sitting at home watching the new episode of Home and Away or Neighbours. It's just always been part of who I am. So I had some jobs when I was younger, working in the back end of pubs, working in entertainment bookings and management that I did as a bit of a side hustle on the side. It was always music, and as you know, when I had Jabba the cover band running and was doing national tours and international stuff, I always had Jabba to come back to and play 5 or 6 nights a week with, which was great. But I found personally for me, after doing it for so long, I started to lose a little bit of the magic that music had. And when I listened to music, all of a sudden I didn't hear music as a whole or any of the magic in it anymore. I'd lost that. I'd hear music and I'd dissect it straight away. And so I'll mention a guy, a really good friend of mine, that I started the Irish Murphys format. A great Brisbane pub that's still going and still has the same format all these years later. With great cover bands and Queensland's best cover acts in there. I think they still operate 7 nights a week with live entertainment. And
one of the few that have done that, which is great.
Yeah, so the guy that I started that with is a guy called Sean Baker, who's a really good friend of mine. He went on to become the national manager for Rockpool, so the Bavarian chains and El Camino chains and all that. That was all him. And he at the time needed someone specialised in Queensland to help him put together some umpar bands and stuff, which were pretty non-existent up here then. There was a great guy called Andrew.
Sorry, just before you get to there, can we just go back to your playing side of things? Who were some of the acts that you worked with over the years that you'd say people would know?
Oh, I'm a bit like you, Nick. I hate sort of.
This is interesting.
I sort of hate self-spruiking. It's just part of.
Self-spruiking. It's like
we'll talk about the night I met you. The night I met you, obviously, you saw me playing with Angry Anderson as lead guitar player, which was a great night. I actually got to meet some amazing Queenslanders that night. I met Wally Lewis, the King.
Tomo was there.
Tomo was also there. Got to have a drink with those guys at the end of the show.
Brownie the Weatherman.
Brownie the Weatherman, and I got to meet my good mate Nick Phillips. That was the first time I met you.
You're playing with Jeff Lovejoy, who engineered my album Four Poet Steps in '97, and Jeff's a mad guy who's a brilliant engineer who's once again should be up there with Rick Rubin. Just the way things go.
Yeah, look, Jeff and I are like brothers. Sometimes we don't talk for months, and then other times we talk every day for 2 weeks. The thing I love about Jeff is, as you know, Nick, there's chemistry you have with certain musicians in your life. Jeff's also another generational muso like me. His dad's a fantastic guitar player. He plays in a band with his sister and his dad called Lovejoy Surf, which is just a fantastic act. They're headlining Greaser Fest coming up. The thing about Jeff and I is there's a thing that guitar players call comping. And it just means you're complementing the other guitar player. You're not playing the same thing. And that they're all the natural things that Jeff and I have. There's a line that Keith Richards uses that Jeff and I use a lot when someone says to us, when they watch us playing in one of the different acts we play with, also, playing in some of the headliner singers that we've played with together. They say, who's a better guitar player? And both of us like to say, well, we're both shit guitar players, but together we're better than 1,000 guitar players. So, I've got a lot of time. A lot of time and love. He's one of my really good mates.
So, sorry for taking you back to that, but I just want to point out to people that across Nate's career, even though he only just mentioned Angry, really, he's played with. In American terms, when I lived in America, you had these great session players who would play with a lot of the big artists around the country. Nath was kind of doing that in Australian terms back here, working with a lot of artists around the place, as well as doing his own cover band thing. And here's a funny story, mate. When I lived in Los Angeles, I had my band that I was doing, and we recorded my album for Poetry and Beer with. And my guitarist, Pat Wilson, Pat used to play in a cover band down at Santa Monica every Sunday or something. And the band was run by Mick Fleetwood. It was Mick Fleetwood's cover band. And Pat played in that band. So, it's like, yeah, you got these worlds where you're playing with these great artists, you're doing what, you're doing major things, and then you're making your living out of doing cover band stuff. And obviously for Mick Fleetwood, that was just a fun thing he did. But you got this whole variety. So you had that going on, and you went from that, as you said, to them booking bands for this group, hotel group.
Yeah,
Let's go to there.
Yeah, so, well, that's kind of how I fell into it, Nick, was because I'd always, as I said on the side, I'd always work for different pub groups, booking entertainment and stuff. And then Sean phoned me, got me a position in the company as a national entertainment. And then I was asked to become a subcontractor to them to save them a bit of money, which is how we started Jabba Entertainment. And
now, Jabba's your nickname, right?
It is. It was my nickname through, moving to Queensland from New South Wales. I've got a big, loud laugh, and which you would hear weekly when we talk on the phone. And so at the time, there was a cartoon called The Amazing Space Race or something. A mate of mine, Juddy, from Petrie Primary School, named it. He said I was like Jabba Jaws, the cartoon character.
Oh, so it wasn't Jabba the Hutt; it's Jabba Jaws. There you go.
Well, that's my version of the story, Nick. It might have been Jabba the Hutt.
So where did the nickname Fat Jesus come from?
That's a golf nickname. That's a good friend of mine, Timmy Gleaves, who's from North England. He's got one of those great accents. He was talking to his daughter when we were away on a golf trip one time, and he's got these two beautiful, lovely little girls, and he was Skyping them. And I walked past with my hair out, because they only knew me from golf wearing a hat and they'd never seen my hair out before. One of his daughters went, "Is that Uncle Nave?" And he said, "Hey, it's Uncle Nave. Come over here, Nave." And I looked down and I leant into the camera like that with my hair out. She went, "You look like Fat Jesus." And there was me and 23 other mates from a golf circle, and it stuck.
So, are there any other nicknames, like the time living in Sydney and Cronulla Way? Is there any from that way that we need to be making notice of, or any other things that people don't know?
No, nothing from Maroubra. It was all Nathan or Wardy down there. So
Nathan or Wardy, okay. So yeah. We've covered the main one with Jabba, right? So Jabba came from your nickname, Jabba. And
it was just one of those things, Nick, that you're kind of in Australia and Scotland and Ireland and stuff. We like to give friends nicknames, and it's one of those things you either embrace it or you hate it. I've just always kind of embraced mine. I think they're funny. I love the whole.
When I was at primary school, my dad was like the cricket coach for Wilston Districts at that time, as we had, and I was an opening batsman, wicket keeper, and passionate about cricket. And because of Phillips, I kind of got the nickname Flopsy. Flopsy, that was my primary school nickname, and I was Flopsy. And there's just like Graham Robinson, a few friends of mine from those days. They're the only ones whose name is Flopsy. But you hang on to those things because they're a time of your life where you had this group of friends that it was really interesting. Coming out of high school, I had a lot of time where I wasn't confident enough to go to school reunions or anything, because I'd turn up and you'd have all these friends who'd gone into banking or this and that, and they were being very successful. And I was still I'm a musician trying to build my career, and I was a bit, you'd feel a bit about that. But in the last decade or so, I've actually gone to a few of those things, and it's been really interesting because in the early days, I felt everyone was just competing with each other, trying to see what you're doing and all that stuff. It's kind of in my stage of life now. I've got to the point where everyone, whether you've been super successful or not, you've gone through a cycle of good things, bad things. It's just everything else. And we've got to the point where everyone knows it doesn't really matter anymore. And you've kind of gone back to where we were in high school. It's like,
Yep.
it's not judgmental of each other. It's just we've all gone through a roller coaster ride. Some people are still married, some are divorced, some have had cancer, some are doing this, whatever else. But end of the day,
Yeah.
we're still kind of the people we were at school. And that's just a cool place to be, where you can relive those memories you had, those sort of nicknames you had and everything else, and just enjoy it without being judgmental of each other. And that's actually a cool thing about getting old that people don't realise, you know.
Well, it's a key to life, isn't it, Nick? That's everyone thinks it's money and material things that make you happy, and you know, you and I both know it's not. That's not the key to life.
On that point, obviously you went from working for this first group, and I imagine there was a journey where you went through different progressions in the agency game and everything else, and you've landed up now having your own business, Jabba, which is doing really well. And mate, we work together. It's no secret in letting people know that. So where you've landed now, why are you there, and what's your vision for why you're there?
Oh, that's a good question, Nick. We fell into it, and I did struggle with it in the start because there were some people that I fell out with just because I was having a go, because I was having a crack.
Yeah, as always happens.
And that's life. Most of them have come around. There's still a couple that don't like me, and that's okay. I can't control what people think of me. But the main thing that I want to leave, and the main thing that I share with me and all my staff and my business partner, is that we want to leave the industry better than when I found it. And the interesting part where you and I started to become good mates and close was during, you know, that awful period of COVID. And that's what happened for us, was a natural war of attrition during that time in terms of a business, because what we did at the time, like you, Nick, where you were going out and you were creating your own busking shows at Sandgate in the what was it called, the Hexagon Park thing there with the pond and
the pond and all that, the platoon whatever.
Yeah, you were doing all those things. And what we did as a company, because we were lucky enough to still have some tours and some things that kind of slipped through the cracks where we could still earn enough to get us by, the first thing we did is we created a non-profit organisation for musicians that had slipped through the cracks. And they're the type of musicians that don't have ABN numbers, they weren't paying tax properly, they weren't putting super away. There was those people that fell through the cracks. I had an experience with a couple of them where one of them committed suicide. That was a young kid. So it sort of sparked me into action to create Muso for a mower. And what we did was we got mowers for musicians and whippersnippers, and we started a company, in Channel 9 and 7 and 10 and all that all jumped on board. They gave us a lot of exposure. So we pushed that agenda pretty hard. And we got a lot of people, a lot of work for nothing. And that created for us a reputation with musicians, their family members and friends and all that, which you know, which kind of put us in good stead once the music industry started to come back. And then the other thing that we did as a company was we started another organisation to expose and to be honest with you, Nick, you and I laugh about this, but it's something I would never do again in terms of getting involved in politics, because it's so ruthless and cutthroat. Was where we organised the protest, which you came and were a speaker at.
First time we met.
No, first time was the Angry Gig, and that was second time.
Oh, sorry. So
COVID thing. But that COVID march, we had thousands of people, and we got a media ban.
Hang on. Let me say, I didn't, at the Angry Anderson gig, I didn't put the two and two together. We met, but I didn't know you and Nathan from Jabba and all that stuff. The first time I knew you, who you were in your position, what you do, was when we met at the march. At the march,
yeah. Well, as you know, Nick, it was a big slog for us. The Queensland Police were amazing. They were really supportive. They helped us push it through. The Premier's office were absolutely awful and tried to stop us.
You don't need to talk about that, but just let people know there was a lot of things that went on.
Yeah, there was a lot of
backflow.
Yeah, a lot of disgusting.
No one was talking at the event. No one was talking radical things. We were thanking the police for being there, and I remember Jonathan, one of the local council guys from the Greens Party, he was there saying, "Why are you guys being so nice to the police?" It's like, well, we don't really have an issue with the police. They're like kind of being forced to do what they do, and a lot of them are losing their jobs too because they have to get the jab thing. We just want to make it known that no one is in the politicians from Labor or Liberal is standing up to support people in the gig economy, sole traders, small business people. None of them were helping us. They were throwing us out on the thing. And because you did that, you got a lot of back flack for that. And maybe we don't need to go into that. It's just fair enough to say that from an outsider looking in, that was just disgusting what went on that side. But so we got through that. You've done those things with the business, and you've got a business now that does multiple layers. You book local gigs, you do touring acts, you do festivals. What else have I missed there? And what's your vision for where you're going to take this thing to?
It's funny you say those things, Nick, because that's the stuff that everyone sort of sees. That's the propaganda, so to speak. They see the big touring acts that we're doing. They see the big festivals that we're doing. The thing that's Carl, who's another booker that works for me that I mentioned again before, is a good mate of yours and mine, Carl Blazanski. The thing that Carl and I both enjoy the most is we enjoy getting kids out of school and universities, out of council programs, and teaching them about the industry, teaching them about self-worth, teaching them about marketing, teaching them the importance of the message of what they're about as entertainers, and we don't tie those kids up into exclusive deals. We try and teach them about the music industry, and set them on their way. And yes, we do try and book them work, but we do that through a strategic platform that we have in the terms of the way that we discover them. And that, to be honest with you, the proudest moments I've had in this company, there's been a couple of times when Carl and I have honestly been in tears, just watching the development of where those kids have come from to where they've gotten to seeing them become professional musicians. And I can't even explain to you why, but that's the biggest satisfaction I have in my company. It's not the big ticketed things. They are great. And again, it's great for your ego when you sell a Grinspoon show. We've got some Grinspoon shows and tours coming up that are almost sold out now that will easily sell out. They're great. They boost your ego. It's really good. But the greatest feeling I have is knowing that we've made a difference to people's lives, and we've invested in next generations. And I still quite haven't worked out why that's so rewarding for me, Nick, because it certainly doesn't pay the bills. But
speaking we're kind of talking in parallel terms between what we both do, and mate, I really admire that what you're doing by putting action on the ground. A lot of my arguments during the whole COVID thing and everything else was about how, as an industry, the government keeps looking at our sector as the arts sector that needs to be propped up by grants and these things, and help kids learn music, and that's great. I've got no harm with that. Let's help kids learn music, but the people who are going to do it are going to learn their craft anyway. They're going to be passionate. They're going to do it. Where the real problem comes is they become good at what they do because they do it every weekend, every night time in their bedroom. They're learning what they do. They get to a point where they're ready to turn their art into a business, and there is no support at the government level to turn that process into a business. That's the hole for me. And the fact that you're working on filling that hole is a part of a picture I think is really important, and somewhere where we haven't spoken directly about this, but I think our messages meet over the fact that to me, Southeast Queensland should be the Austin or Nashville of Asia Pacific. We should be the place where we're generating music that drives domestic consumption, that is a major export product, but also
Yep.
attracts international investment into our sector that can run parallel to our film industry. You know, the film industry, our music industry should be doing the same type of thing, but our government keeps, all governments here in Australia keep bringing our music industry back to being something that needs to be propped up by grants, and it's not a real industry, really. Music is the most consumed product in the world. We should
Yep.
be thought of as being the same as the coal industry or the building sector and everything else. How do we drive the economy through what we do? And the governments aren't doing it. And what you're trying to do with these type of programs, I think, is a piece of that puzzle, and that's stuff that I'm talking about. So we're kind of talking two parallel messages which do combine.
I agree, Nick. The biggest thing I see, you know, without trying to get too political, the biggest problem we have in the music industry is the splits and fractures within our industry, and we're not regulated or unionised as a whole. So therefore, we don't have a voice in Parliament, and it may shock. It may shock.
You look at how many gig economy employees there are. It could be a really powerful political voice if we could find a way to actually bring that voice together.
Exactly, I agree. Trying to do that, but again, the personal attacks you get every time you try and do it, it becomes quite hard.
Well, a great example is when you put the protest together in Brisbane, none of the other artists or agents in Brisbane came on board to be part of that thing. They saw it was a Jabba thing, where you weren't pushing Jabba through what you were doing. You were putting together a thing for the music industry. And right. I know you would have taken a backward step and let other people speak from other agencies and other organisations and to bring people together, but they couldn't do that. And that's where just people need to grow up. Need to grow up and get over all kind of these minor. We're a small little area like Brisbane, but if we work together wisely, we can actually make this the musical hub for Southeast Asia, I believe.
I believe so too, Nick. It only takes one visit to Nashville for you to see the infrastructure, the business infrastructure that's been there for 80 to 100 years. And the business behind it would blow any musician that hasn't seen their mind, or any government person that hasn't gone to realise what entertainment does for the economy. For example, in Nashville, on a strip of, I know you've seen it, Nick, and you've been there, but within a strip of 1 kilometre, there can be over 380 bands play in one day. And it starts
even extending beyond that.
3 o'clock at night. And the hub around it, not only with the music infrastructure, is if you live in Canada, if you live in anywhere in South America, anywhere in America, and you have a hens party, that's the capital to where all the girls go for their hens parties. And when you look at what they create from a grassroots level all the way through to what they export, the fact that country music now is one of the most popular genres again, and you see the session work and the acts like Chris Stapleton, who are just the world's biggest acts now, they're all from Nashville, and they've all come from that humble start. The Grand Ole Opry, it's all there. And it was a thing, you're right, it's a thing that started with the government, and all we would need is the same thing here. And I thought when we got the Valley precinct, I thought that was the start of it.
It catered to a niche at the end of the day. Mate, going back to the basics, you're talking about the artists in Nashville, but looking at like even the system they have around the session artists, the session players in LA and New York and all this, they have a system whereby when you get paid, it works through their union, and they have certain money that goes to their super, their version of their super, to their tax. They've got all these things sorted. We need a system here, I believe, whereby when an artist works at a pub or writes something for a movie or is working at a festival, if we could have a system where their money could be paid into a system where they're actually getting their super looked after, getting their tax looked after, and getting structure around them where they can phone up and get advice on how they run their business on a commercial level. Because that, mate, I go in, people have seen my chats here before, and I'm kind of repeating myself, but I go into a panic attack panic attack looking at a bank statement. That's not part of who I am, and it's failed me across my career. But I
Yep.
would love to get that type of support, and I would love to see that type of support happening to young artists coming through, because I'm not alone. A lot of artistic people struggle with those basic business things. How do you put money? And it's not just a matter of saying, well, you're lazy to do it. No, every other people, all the other people in the world, they get like a weekly wage or a fortnightly wage, whatever, and their money comes out. I do a gig, I might get paid 2 weeks down the track, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks down the track, and you never really know where money's coming in. And by the time you get your money in, well, these bills are piled up here, and you've got to get them out of the way so you can just keep your head above water. And you don't put aside the right tax money, you don't do all that stuff. When you try and do it by yourself, you get lost in this whole mess. Whereas if we
Yep.
had a system that could help artists do that, that's the type of stuff I would love government support from. Then to stop putting money into touring grants and everything else, because if an act's going to be successful on the road, they need to have a good enough show to draw people and sell tickets. End of the day, if you can't do that, don't go on the road. So the
Exactly.
government doesn't have to back that up, but help them do the things where the failings are, which is in how do we run our business properly. And I would love to be able to pair up young artists with a business sponsor, a company that could maybe take them on board to mentor them on the business side. And then maybe
Yep.
those young artists can work with that company to put on events during the year where they help promote that business. Those type of things that are, beneficial on both ways, that create an industry.
Nick, the amount of young people in the last 6 months that I've asked if they're members of APRA that are not, has blown me away. They don't even know about it. And again, the government, I agree, should be sinking money into programs through APRA to create more pathways and education and
APRA is a good setup. But for people who don't know, if you play songs at your gigs, which is your own original music, if you sign those songs with APRA, you actually put in a live performance return and you get paid back for, the venues pay a certain amount of money to APRA, and there's this huge pool of money that gets gathered from radio, from venues and everything else. And APRA do a great job at dispersing that amongst artists. But that's something that a lot of artists don't know about. And to me, one of the things I would love to see happen, Nathan, I've mentioned this before in my chats, is I think the Queensland government, to their credit, are doing a great job in attracting film projects to Queensland. I think Screen Queensland and all that, they're doing some great projects here. And a lot of that's based on the fact that they put in these tax incentives, that the people who invest in it get incentives to film here. Now, if they increase those incentives a little bit, so that if the investors get more benefits if they use maybe 10% of Queensland music in those films.
Yep.
That's kind of something that makes sense. Same, we have a really strong gaming industry here. There are some great gaming products being made out of Queensland. If there were more tax incentives maybe for them to be able to get incentives by using Queensland music in those projects, that's residual income. It's income that keeps coming back to the artists. And one of the things that, one of my good friends, and he's kind of like one of the godfathers of the music industry, Sebastian Chase. Sebastian has said for a long time, most artists coming into the industry, they will spend maybe 10 to 15 years getting into the game, but getting to where they need to be successful. And all that time, most of them invest in themselves. Now, if you're going to be a doctor or whatever else, you kind of go through uni and you get HECS, or you get these, university payment schemes as a student to help you get through. There's none of that for musicians and artists. So you pay you support your own way, you get to this point, and when you do get successful, you actually generate a lot of income back into our economy. So maybe thinking about if an artist gets successful, maybe there should be maybe a period of time where we get tax exemptions in replacement of HECS that we paid for ourselves to get to that point, which is bringing a benefit to the economy. And that money can then be used to attract more investment into our local arts community. But mate, I think the positive out of all this is that, and why I wanted to chat with you was, I think we're never going to make government change their mind. I mean, personally, I think coming up to our next election, the vote is important. I will never again vote for Labor. I've decided that. I wrote a letter to Christofouli's office pointing all these things out, what went through, and I was hoping and asking what would they do better. I didn't get a response, so I'm not voting for them. I'll be voting for independents, and that's where I'll be going. And I hope that we eventually get enough independents in Parliament who speak out the voices for the people that will carry some weight, where the major parties, who will always hold power, have to listen to the local voices. But I don't think we're going to change our industry through the government. I think we're going to change our industry by people stepping up and showing how commercially we can be a much stronger entity. And I think, mate, from our chats, what you're talking about, what you're doing with your business, what you're looking at doing with young artists coming through, what you're looking at building your vision into, is the way that we can build a vision that people will follow. And that's why I want to chat with you, mate, and highlight what you're doing, because I think that that's how we will make changes in our game.
No, thanks, mate. I think we've always kind of connected on those things, and because segue back to sport again, it's like every successful team, you see a certain amount of young guys, and they always need a few old heads in the team to show them the way, to show them how to train, to show them how to keep a cool head. And I think it's you and I were fortunate enough to have great guys ahead of us that helped us, and I think it's just the right thing to do to invest back into that, because the thing is, as you mentioned before, we do love what we do. We love our industry.
Mm-hmm.
We love entertaining people. People deserve to be entertained. People deserve to be, especially during some of the times that we've been through and that we're going through with the economy. It feels great to go and have a drink with your friends and watch a great band, or go and watch a great movie with the soundtracks that are on the movie. And I think it's people like you and I, and guys like Dan Munn, another good mate of mine, that share that same philosophy in terms of investing back into our younger musicians, investing back into our industry. And I do believe the same as you, mate. I think if Peter Garrett couldn't get the things off the ground through political channels, I think we're hard pressed.
Talk about a lesson in reality that Peter went through. That was like amazing. But mate, I also, one thing I'd just like to mention, probably as we come into closing time, is that our industry, while in Southeast Queensland, which I think can be a major influence on our Asia Pacific region, but
Agreed.
in real terms, it's a small industry. It's a small, most it's pubs and clubs, and a lot of part timers along the way doing their thing. But there are a lot of divisions within that small. You get a small pond like that, you get a lot of divisions. And
Yep.
I'm sure us having this chat like this, we're going to have people who give us comments that are negative because they're in work for this agency, or they do this, or they've got a different opinion, or that they're a different team, and that's fine, because everyone's just trying to run their business and make their own profits and do their own thing. But I think there really is a space that we can all evolve into maturely to say, okay, whatever agency you work for, whatever venues you work for, whether you're an original artist or a cover artist or whatever else your story is, there is an area where we can come together and meet and say, how do we make this all work for our industry and become, as an industry, a leader of the economy that the government has to catch up to us on, and work together. We can compete against each other. We can, battle over venues or do whatever else. But end of the day, how do we make our industry something that is beneficial to our state economy, to the national economy, and then create a platform where you don't have to be putting grants into our industry, but we can self-fund the development of new artists coming through, and we can we should be looking at how we develop our own streaming service in Australia that
100%.
caters to Australian music, not a lot relying on Spotify and everything else. How do we get those conversations happening amongst people instead of looking at divisions within our local little pond? And mate, that's something, if we're going to end on anything, I would like to throw out there to say, and I think you'll agree with me, that you and I would love to have those conversations with other people in our local industry to say, how do we work together to make it all better?
I agree, Nick, and I think it's a great closing point. Is, you know, I'd love for any of my peers or any of the other industry leaders that do watch this to know, I think there's enough fruit on the tree for us all, and until we unite and lobby the government together, we're all going to be paddling upstream individually.
May not even lobby the government. Let's create let's create the success. If we have success, the government's going to chase after us. If you go to the government with cap in hand, you're always going to be like they'll play games with us. But if we can all work together to make our industry successful, the government's going to want a slice of that. Then we say to them, okay, you want a slice of that? Put this into it.
100%. 100%, mate. Yep.
Mate,
any of those industry people out there listening to this, contact Nick and I. Let's get this going.
Absolutely. We're all open for discussions across the board. Brother, thank you very much for taking the time to have this chat. And I hope it's been fun for you. It's been fun for me.
Great, Nick. It's always a good conversation with you and I, mate. And just thank goodness all these people that are watching this don't hear some of our private phone call conversations.
Well, mate, we have a lot of chats like this, and we've given them an insight into what we will waste an hour or two of our day occasionally on doing. And yeah, it's like, yeah, back in the day, I think it sounds crazy, but I think Australian men got a lot of benefits from sitting in the public bar, having a beer together and just whinging about shit. It kind of became a therapy session. And I think you and I have these phone calls every now and then where we just have to have this therapy session between ourselves to deal with what we're getting through in the day. And it's great to have mates you can do that with. And I thank you for being one of those mates.
No, you too, Nick. I appreciate it, mate. Thank you, brother.
May I wind up this recording? On the end of it, I am going to put, I'm going to edit in because we're not doing this live tonight. I've recorded it and I'm going to put it up. But I'm going to put up a video that Tuffy and I did in the studio when Nathan played guitar with us, and he's in the video clip. And my mum always loves it. She watches it, and she watches you sitting back in the car, in the chair playing guitar, and says, "What's that guy doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's Nathan." She's like, "Oh, that's Nathan." No. So I'm going to edit that.
A lot of fun doing these songs, mate. That was good. That was good fun.
It was really good fun. And mate, I look forward to having lots more fun with you. And I love the opportunity to playing at the Creedence support act, mate. So book me into more of them. That would be great.
No, well, definitely. Let's get it through Queensland with a few of those for us, Nick.
Exactly. All right, mate. I'm going to end this. I'll chat to you after I turn this off. But thanks for your time, mate.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone at home.